All right. Thank you guys so much for being here with me for our. Nope, sorry, sweetie. You're gonna have to do something else. Let me see.
Honey said I had to do my math before I go to bed.
There.
Sorry.
All right. Hey, everybody. Happy Wednesday. I cannot believe we're already to the end of September. But thank you guys for spending your Wednesday evening with me. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Angela. I used to be a public school teacher, and I left school in order to unschool my own kids and to help other families just like you to do the same. So I wanted to just come on here and give you guys the opportunity to ask any questions that you might have about homeschooling or unschooling. 5 years ago, I had no idea what unschooling was, and I wish that I could have had someone that I could talk to and ask them questions to help me along the process. And so that's why I do these every month. So yeah, if you guys have any questions about unschooling, we're a small group tonight, which is pretty nice. So if you have questions about unschooling, you feel free to just unmute yourself. You're welcome to unmute and ask. Or if you like, if you feel more comfortable, you can just type your questions in the chat and then I'll go ahead and make sure I can get to each one. So who would like to kick us off? All right, Shannon. Hey, Shannon.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. So I am new to the unschooling world.
Awesome.
So this is our first official year.
Great.
My question, I too came from the public school system. I was a counselor. Um, and my question is, a lot of people that I've talked to from unschooling, really don't follow anything curriculum wise, right? You just kind of go with the flow.
Yep.
And as the child leads and things like that.
Yeah.
My question is, and so I'm trying to find a balance between I do care about rigor in case my kids ever do want to return to like a Christian Christian school or something like that.
Mhm.
Um, as well as just being able to talk to some of their friends who are in public school. So I'm trying to strike that balance.
Mhm.
I have one of my kids has an IEP, so I also like it helps me to see like what her quote unquote gaps may be for like
Mhm.
reading and things like that. Um, how have you heard of anyone who has a balance in that? Like, is there a balance? Is it possible to want to explore the world and teach that, but also have like some skeleton of like, okay, these are things. So I'm just kind of not like left field with it. I'm trying to, work my way through it. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to
Yeah.
say?
Yes, it totally does. I think a lot of people have this idea that unschoolers aren't doing anything or that there isn't structure or there isn't formal learning that's happening, and that is definitely not the case. I think the biggest difference between unschoolers and everyone else is number one, who is in control, like who's in control of that structure, if that makes sense. And so with an unschooler, we really want the child to be the one who's creating the kind of structure that they need and figuring out how do I want to structure my life. And I know that for some people that can seem like a very radical thing to give a child freedom over their life and control over their life. Um, but for me, what I have found is that the only way for our children to cultivate intrinsic motivation is to give them the freedom and the space to be able to figure that out, and to be able to do that while they're still under my roof is, for me, I feel like it's a huge advantage. At the same time, we're also not being neglectful either, right? So I think there's something to be said where you can have conversations with your children and say, hey, you know what, I think it's really important that you can learn how to be a great writer, and you can share with your children like the benefits of being a great writer, and ask them, invite them to be a part of the process. What are the things that you like to write about? What areas of your writing would you like to improve? How would you like to work on that? Do you want to take an online class? Do you want to work with a tutor? Do you want to like just
You're muted.
sorry about that. I don't know how that
You
happened.
s- You stopped at tutor. Like, do you want an online
Okay.
tutor? How do you want to go about that?
Thank you. Yeah, yeah. So for me, it's really important that they're a part of the conversation about how they want to structure their life. There are some kids that want to have more structure and they want to even follow a curriculum or they want to take a class, or they want to have a private tutor, right? But then there are other kids that doesn't really work for them. That's not really their passion. That's not really their interest. And I can tell you firsthand if you're trying to force and coerce your kids to sit down and write or to sit down and do math and they're not interested in that, or if they don't see the value in that, it's going to be miserable for them and it's going to be miserable for you. I don't know if you've had that experience where you've tried to like make your kids do something that they're just not really buying into it.
So I did last year, I started homeschooling, right? So I just kind
Uh-huh.
of played with a lot of different things
Yeah.
to see what worked for us, right? Like
Mhm.
what flow, what times work best for them. Like, you know what I mean? So I would do little things to try to learn and like you said, kind of see what their zone is. And we
Mhm.
found some things like curriculum or like programs that they liked.
Mhm.
So like they were excited to do it. Um, but just trying to find, like so I like what you're saying, how you're explaining it, because the people I've spoken to before, it made it like, oh yeah, no, my kids, we just go and we just, and I'm like, well, I can't handle that, child. So I need to figure out how to work this thing out, you know? So I like
Yeah.
how you're saying that it still can be structured, but they're, you get them involved in what works for them
Yeah.
and they're
They're
just
a
them.
part of the conversation, right? I think ultimately what we want to avoid is and again, I've seen this time and time again. If I'm over here and I'm saying, okay, you need to sit down and write a paragraph about this book that I'm assigning you to read. And they're like, what the heck? Like, I don't, you know, you know what I mean? They're like, I don't like that book. I'm not interested in that book. Why are you making me write this random paragraph? Like, whenever there's force and coercion in our relationship with our child, it doesn't go very well. And so that's part of why the unschooling philosophy really works is because we're doing that. We're wanting to empower our children to be self-directed learners. And it's hard because in order for them to learn how to be a self-directed learner, we have to let go of the control. And I know that that's hard. But yeah, so that would be my recommendation. It's not that they're not having structure control, it's just who's in charge of the structure and control. We want them to take ownership of their life. And of course, you as a parent are there to say, hey, I think this would be an important thing for you to learn about. And at the same time, being okay if they're like, you know what, I don't agree. I don't want to learn algebra one right now. Like, and I know that might be hard for you to hear, but I promise you that if and when your children do need to learn those higher levels of math, they will. And when they're ready to learn it, they will learn it really quickly and they will learn it really well. Did that answer your question, Shannon?
Yeah, I thought I tried to put it in the chat. I was saying that
Okay.
makes a lot of I think that's the most clear, yeah, explanation, like you said, of how that would how that would work. It's not necessarily just wake up and we just go with the day. It is just really more collaboration and giving them a voice and what that actually looks like. So that's dope how you said it.
Yeah, thanks. All right. I see Juliana asked a great question. She said, how does unschooling work? Giving them freedom, etc., and teaching them structure and resilience in learning to do the things that they don't necessarily want or like to do. Don't we need to teach them that they will need to do things in life that they don't want to do? So this is actually a very common question that I get. And again, I think it really goes back to your relationship with your child, right? For me, the education really is secondary. First and foremost for me is what kind of a relationship do I want with my children? Do I want my relationship with my children to be one that is based on mutual respect, on love, on trust, on autonomy, on kindness and gentleness, compassion, empathy? Or do I want our relationship to be one that is based on force and coercion, on threats, on manipulation, on control and punishment? And that really is the choice before every single one of us. What do I want my relationship with my child to be like? And so when you can decide how do I want my relationship with my child to be, then you're going to take actions that are consistent with that of the kind of person that you want to be. That's going to result in specific actions that you're going to take that will align with that. Right. When it comes to doing things that we don't want to do, of course, we all have to do things that we don't want to do. But I don't believe that I have to force and coerce and threaten my child to do things that they don't want to do just because I want them to do it, if that makes sense. Like they my daughter is is an unschooler, and she has full like autonomy over her life and making her own choices and things like that. And she absolutely does things that she doesn't like or enjoy. I'll give you an example. My daughter really wanted to have a dog, and I, as a single mom, really did not want to have a dog. I did not need an extra expense in my life. And so she decided that she wanted to start a dog business where rather than me paying for a pet, people would pay her to take care of their pets. And I was like, that is an awesome idea. I love it. Go for it. So when she was 7 years old, she started her own business where she was taking care of other people's dogs. And she's 10 now. So she's been doing this business now for 3 years. And when she first started her business, again, her motivation, her purpose, her passion was being able to play with the dogs and cuddle them and take them on walks and all the fun stuff, right? Well, eventually the dogs are going to poop, right? And what did she really want to pick up the poop? No. Was she excited about that? Absolutely not. I mean, there were a couple of days at the beginning she was like dry heaving. I mean, it was a thing, for her to be able to pick up this dog poop. It wasn't something that she really enjoyed, but it was something that she was still choosing to do because it was a step on her path of accomplishing what she actually wanted to do. So even though, if she could have chosen to not pick up poop, I'm sure she would have preferred, definitely, I don't want to pick up poop. But she was still choosing to do that because she wanted something else more. And so that's kind of the game of unschooling, right? Is helping your child to figure out, what are my personal goals for my life? What are the things that I'm committed to? What are the things that I want to achieve in my life? And then how do I want to achieve them? And part of that is saying, you know what? I really am not excited about learning algebra. I'm really not. That was me. But if I want to go to college to become a nurse, then that means I'm going to have to learn algebra. So they're choosing to learn algebra, not because they love it necessarily, but because it's a required step in order to get to where they need to go. I'm not sitting there as the parent and saying, I think you need to learn algebra, so I'm going to make you sit at this table for the next 3 hours and do these math worksheets because I think you need to learn algebra. No, they're saying, nope, I want to become a nurse. And in order for me to become a nurse, I have to learn this thing that I'm not really excited about. And so I'm going to figure out how I want to learn it. So they're still just by essence of existing in the world, like they're having to do things that they don't necessarily want to do. But again, it goes back to that intrinsic motivation. Do we want our children to learn to do things that they don't want to do because they have something greater that they're desiring? Or do we want them to just do the stuff that they don't want to do because we're threatening them? If they don't do it, you're going to be punished. If you don't do this, you're not going to hang out with your friends. If you don't do what I say, then I'm going to take away your phone. Right? Like, again, it goes back to the relationship. How do I want my relationship with my children to be? Do I want it to be centered on trust and autonomy, or do I want to interact with my children through force and control and manipulation and threats? It's a very deep question. Juliana said my son would only want to learn about Legos. Awesome. I think that's great. There are a lot of people in the world that's what they're passionate about, and they find ways to make a great living playing with Legos all day. So again, I think we as parents, this is part of our own deschooling process, right? Is that we look at our kids and we place a value on certain subjects or on certain tasks or on certain, um, you know, activities more than others. And I think part of the challenge of unschooling and deschooling ourselves is really learning to value all the things equally. Like it is just as valuable for your child to want to play Legos as it is for them to want to learn how to play the piano. One is not better than the other. And when we can really get that both are equally valuable, and regardless of whatever they choose, like I will be just as happy if my child chooses to play with Legos as I will be if he chooses to play the piano. Like that's the challenge, right? Is I'm able to love and support my kid regardless of the things that they're passionate about, even if it's not something that I necessarily am passionate about. All right, let me see. Colette said, my children love to be on PBS Kids. They've learned a lot because they have amazing educational games. How to best minimize screen time? Oh, that is a good question, Colette. So there's a lot of debate in the unschooling world about screen time. And to be honest, I'm not quite entirely sure where I land on this. On this. So there's a whole branch of unschoolers. They refer to themselves as radical unschoolers, and they give their children freedom in all areas of their life, not just when it comes to education or subjects, but also when it comes to things like screens and bedtime and stuff like that. Um, Radical unschoolers will tell you that when we give our children freedom to use the tools that they want as much or as little as they want, over time they will learn how to self-regulate. They will learn how to decide how much is enough for them, and they will just kind of balance themselves out because we're taking away the incentive of it by limiting it. And I can see that that is true in my life. Like I don't know if this has happened to you, but it's like the moment that you go on a diet and then you're like, I'm not going to have any sugar, right? And the moment that you say that to yourself, it's like all of a sudden you're just craving sugar, where as like normally you wouldn't have noticed it or you wouldn't have been thinking about it as much. But the moment that you set a limit, immediately it's like that, by setting the limit, like it just increases the desire for that thing. And radical unschoolers say that their children experience that, or they observe that their children experience that by limiting or restricting screens, it just increases the draw of them and the attractiveness of them because we're trying to limit it and control it. Whereas when we give our children freedom with screens, then it kind of takes away the appeal. It's like, oh, I can play on my iPad whenever I want to, so I don't have to like binge and obsess over this thing because mom's going to take it away in an hour. Um, they're free to have it or not have it, and so it doesn't make it as appealing. I definitely could see that that has been the case with my daughter. My daughter is 10 years old and she pretty much has like I don't have any limits for her when it comes to screens. Um, she's able to play as much or as little as she wants to. Of course, now I'm not, irresponsible either. Like I don't, have YouTube on her devices because I know you can go down like the YouTube portals and there's just crazy stuff on YouTube that they can find. So I'm still, trying to be mindful of the things that they have access to on the screens, but I'm not restricting her like, oh, you can only do this for an hour, if that makes sense. Um, that being said, my son is very different. My son is 6 years old and he has a much more difficult time kind of transitioning away from screens. And so, yeah, so this is definitely a topic that I'm on the fence about. I understand the philosophies and theories about, again, around like force and control, and when we try to take things away and threaten our kids, and like it doesn't do great things for our relationship with them. And at the same time, I do see that with my son, it's definitely a lot more of a challenge for him to kind of separate or do other things. Some of the ways that we have handled that as a family are we try to set like not limits, but we try to have, I don't even know the word to call it. We have more like agreements where we're on screens or where we're not. So like for example, if they have friends that are over, they're normally not on screens or tablets because they have friends that are here, and so we want them to play with their friends rather than just, being with their face in a screen kind of a thing. Um, Trying to think. We also did like tech-free Tuesdays for a while, and that was actually really good, even for me as a mom, to have a day that I could just kind of disconnect myself. Because I don't know about you, but I'm on my phone or on a computer literally all day, every day. Like my whole job, my whole life is my whole income source of income is from my phone. And so yeah, so phones are a big part of our lives and our societies and our income and things like that. So yeah, it's something that has benefited me as well, to have a day that I would take a day off from screens and stuff like that. And at the same time also acknowledging, just like you said, like there are some really, really awesome things that our kids can learn through screens. And so I've seen a lot of parents that are like, we're not going to have any screens at all. They're going to be like a completely screen-free family. And if that's you and your family is happy and thriving like that, awesome, go for it. Um, that being said, again, I don't think that the screens are the enemy, right? Like technology is a tool. And I think the more that we can help our children navigate using this tool purposefully, mindfully, for things that are like useful and beneficial, I think that that's a great thing for us to be able to do and to kind of help them navigate that while they're still younger. So yeah, I know it's kind of not really a complete answer. Like I said, this is kind of a topic that I'm still kind of working through how I feel about the screens overall. I see both, and I'm curious to see what you guys think in the comments. So feel free to comment and let me know kind of how your family decides to handle the whole screens and technology and stuff like that. Yeah. All right. So I see Christia said, I started for the first time this year homeschooling with a curriculum, and I signed up with your Umbrella Academy, but right now it's horrible. They don't want to study at all. I want to start unschooling. What do you suggest so I can start doing this with them? Oh, that is a great question. So if your children are resisting school, like if they're resisting structured learning and stuff like that, honestly, just stop. Like, just stop. We all choose to homeschool because we want to put the home first. And I think sometimes we forget that homeschooling is less about school and it really is more about the home and the environment that we want to create with our kids in our house, together as a family, cultivating our lives together. And so I know it can be hard to let go of the curriculum, but that would be my recommendation. Take whatever curriculum you have, stick it in a closet if you're not ready to put it in the trash yet. I understand it took me 2 years to put my curriculum in the trash. If you're not ready to put it in the trash, you can stick it in a closet somewhere and just be with your kids. The biggest challenge for parents during that first initial phase of deschooling, where you're kind of adjusting to this new life and adjusting to unschooling, is doing that, like letting go of anything that is schoolish. And your job as the parent during that season is to look for the learning that your kids are already naturally doing all day, every day. I promise you, when you start looking for it, you will see it and you will find it everywhere. And yeah, so that would be my recommendation. Stick your curriculum in the closet, take a deep breath, encourage your children to just be. And you, as the parent, look for the learning that they're already doing through whatever it is that they're doing, whether it be Legos, whether it be video games, whether it be playing dress up, whether it be going on a walk outside, cooking breakfast together, whatever it is that you may be doing, look for the learning that they're doing. All right, Rosara said, what if we start off in one state and then move to another state? Does that make a difference with the PSA? So for those of you who don't know, the PSA is private school affidavit. That's the form that people have to fill out in California whenever they start homeschooling. So homeschooling laws vary state by state. So if you were to move to another state, then yes, you would have to look up whatever the laws are in your state. And I highly recommend, if you are considering moving, look up the laws in your state before you move. And it's kind of crazy, but homeschooling laws are like one of my top factors if I were to like think about, where would I like to move in the world? Homeschooling is like one of the major factors that I consider when I decide where to move. I look for states. I'm like, okay, I want to go to a state that has really, really awesome homeschooling laws because we want to have as much freedom with our homeschooling as possible. So yeah, you can go to the HSLDA website, and I'll put the link for that in the chat for you. But if you go to hslda.org/legal, and on their website, they have the links for all of the different states on there. So you'll be able to see what the laws are in all the 50 states, and then you can decide. Natalie said, hold on one second. I'm going back up here. All right. Fernando said, how does this program exactly work? Because my mom is very much on board, but she doesn't know how it works because she wants to enroll her 7 and 5-year-old. Okay. All right. Hey, Fernando, thank you for coming on and asking this question. All right. So PAX Academy is a private school for unschoolers. So that means we provide you with the legal covering of a private school with the freedom to do unschooling. Unschooling is a really unique type of homeschooling. Legally speaking, it's a type of homeschooling, but basically, with an unschooling philosophy, everything is entirely self-directed. That means that rather than having a curriculum dictate what, when, where, why, and how you learn, or rather than having you as the parent dictate what, when, where, why, and how they learn, we want our children to be taking ownership of their own education. So your child will be leading the way as far as what they're interested in, what they're passionate about, what they're curious about. And then we as the parents are coming alongside of you and supporting you with tools and resources and all kinds of other things to support you in learning based on your passions and interests. So that's basically how it works. If you have another specific question that you want to know, feel free to comment again and I'll be happy to answer. Colette said, I must say, I do see them in giving it up. I do see them in giving it up more freely. All right. Ingrid said, I have a question. My son is in 12th grade this year. How will he be able to graduate if I put him in the academy this year? What do I need to do or what does he need to do in order to graduate? Ingrid, so thank you for asking that question. So if you have a son who is in high school, regardless of 12th grade, 9th grade, whenever, and you enroll in PAX Academy, I would highly recommend that you take the time to watch our not back to school night video for the high schoolers. I did a 3-hour masterclass on how to hack your high school and college education. In that 3-hour class, I explain literally everything that you could possibly want to know about how you can graduate, how you can save tens of thousands of dollars on your college education as a homeschooler and as an unschooler, all kinds of really great stuff. So after you enroll, I would recommend that you watch that video. And then if you still have questions or you need specific help, you can always book what's called a college and career consultation with me. I recommend that all high school students book a college and career consultation at least once per year. And then during that consultation, we will meet and we'll discuss kind of what their plan is for the year, what their personal or academic goals are, and then we'll make a strategic plan for how they want to achieve those, including when they want to graduate, how they want to graduate, what are the credits that they still need, and all those kinds of things. And you can do that online. All right, Natalie said, I do have to set limits. It's insane. So yes, I know a lot of people say that, like, and it's tricky, right? Like I can't tell you how many radical unschoolers that I have spoken to, and they've all said the same thing, that by removing the limits, it helped their children to not be as like obsessive with the technology. Like when they gave their children freedom around technology, yes, at the beginning. They said yes at the beginning. It was very normal for them to kind of like binge on it a little bit, especially if they're transitioning out of school. It's very, very common for them to kind of almost use it as like a coping mechanism or like recovery from like a PTSD response kind of a thing. That is very common and very normal. But every single person that I've talked to who does radical unschooling has said that over time their kids would just naturally self-limit. And they would naturally figure out like how they wanted to be on screens and that they kind of lost the addictive nature of it when they kind of stopped judging them for how they were wanting to spend their time. So again, I don't have any definitive answers on how that could go for anyone. But that's what a lot of unschoolers said. Again, I could say I've had that experience with my daughter. My experience with my son, who is younger, has been a little bit different. So I'm still navigating that with him. Rosara said, how do I start and how is there someone we check in with often to make sure they're on track? We've been used to having school teachers telling us where our children need more help or where they're behind. As they grow up and each year passes, how does that work? So one of the things I would challenge you to consider, Rosara, is the fact that there is no such thing as behind. I think for many of us, it has been so ingrained in our brains that we need someone else outside of us to tell us what we have to learn, how we have to learn it, when we have to learn it, how we have to prove that we learned it. All of those ideas stem from a schoolish mentality. And when we are choosing to live outside of that system, a huge part of the deschooling process is learning to let go of those ideas. Yeah. And I know that can be really challenging. To be honest, it was very difficult for me at the beginning to let go of this idea that like I have to measure growth in a specific way, or I have to, make sure that they're not falling behind or things like that. Um, but really, like when you can really get that, like your child is on their own unique path in this life. No curriculum, no teacher can ever tell you what your child has to learn or how they have to learn it, because no teacher and no curriculum is your child. And when we can really get that, like your child is on their own unique path in this life, that means that there's no one ahead of them and there's no one behind them. And we're not comparing them to anyone else in the public school system. We're creating a new life without that system, at least in my case. So yeah, it's definitely a very different philosophy. It's a very different way to approach life and learning, and really understanding that our children are free to learn whatever they want, whenever they want, however they want. And it's not necessary for me to like report to someone. It's not necessary for me to do tests and quizzes and homework and all that stuff to make sure that they're learning. No, like you will be able to tell that your kids are learning because you're with them, you're present with them, you're talking to them, you're spending time with them, you're listening to them, you're watching them, you're observing them, you're seeing that your children are learning and that they're growing. And it's something that happens organically. It's something that happens completely naturally. It's something that happens without force. Like you don't have to force your kids to learn things. It's something that they just do because they're human. Um, and so, yeah, I think that will be probably one of the most challenging parts as you begin your own deschooling process. And I would definitely recommend like really investing and dedicating time to specifically deschooling, and researching more about what it means to deschool. Read books about deschooling. I published a book called The Deschooling Diary. It's available on Amazon, but the Deschooling Diary was like, it's the book that I wish I would have had when I first started this 5 years ago. And it every day it will give you like a new question just to kind of reflect on and ponder and kind of think through and analyze, a lot of these things that we just say without really thinking, like, gosh, why do I think that way? Why am I worried about that? What is making me think that I need to check in with someone to make sure they're on track? Why am I concerned that I need a school teacher to tell me where my kid needs to be? So all of those things, and that deschooling process of kind of like decompressing and deconstructing a lot of those schoolish mentalities, it's a really, really important part of making sure that you have a happy and successful homeschooling experience. Jenny said, should we take electronics away at nighttime so they can sleep? So again, like the answer to all of these questions, I think it goes back to what kind of a relationship do you want to have with your children? Again, do you want your relationship with your children to be one that is based on mutual love and trust and respect? Or do you want your relationship with your children to be one that is based on force and control and coercion and, threats and humiliation and punishment and all those kinds of things? And so choosing, how do you want to interact with them, right? How do we handle this in my family? So I will tell you, with my kids, like there have been times where like I'll say, all right, guys, like, it's time to go to bed. Let's go read a book. Um, and they turn them off, like they turn their devices off and they come, not because I'm like, if you don't get off, you're not going to have it tomorrow, like I'm not coercing them, I'm not forcing them, but like they want to spend time with me, like they want to come and read a book before we go to bed, and they want to cuddle up and read. um and there have been other nights where I will tell you, my daughter has told me that some of her favorite memories with me have been the nights that we have stayed up until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning playing video games. um, and actually, to be honest, there's some of my favorite memories with her too. Like there have been a handful of times where like we were playing a video game together, and we just, we're having so much fun. We like lost track of time and we stayed up super late, and we were just playing and laughing and bonding, and it was like some of the best memories that we have. And again, the benefit is like we're unschoolers, so we can sleep in the next day. It's not the worst thing if we stay up until midnight, or later. So, I think it just, again, it depends. It depends. There is something to be said. Like I've read articles with my kids about the impact of like blue light and, and having screens after a certain period of time. but it's all a part of like having them be a part of the conversation. And my daughter will tell me, she's like, Mom, it's getting late. Like, if you're on your screen really late, it will hurt your eyes or you'll get a headache. I'm like, I know, she's right, Um, but again, like they're a part of the conversation of like how we're managing screens and electronics and stuff like that. So yeah, I think, you and your family and your kids all invite them to be a part of the conversation. Ask them, like, do you think that it's important to have limits with screens? I'd be curious what they think. Do you think that it would be a good idea to put screens away before we go to bed? What time do you think would be a good time to put it away? Why do you think we should put it away? Should I put it away too? Like, you know, ask them to be a part of that process of like how you guys as a family want to create your life and create habits that are healthy and things like that. And then at the same time, I think there's something to be said for having that flexibility that you can like stay up till midnight and watch a cool movie together or something like that. Um, but yeah, I think it's something that you need to create together with your kids rather than like you trying to impose a rule or a law on them because that typically does not go over very well. Natalie said, my daughter is 9, almost 10. If I don't set those limits, she will spend all day. Yeah, like I said, I think it's a very common like concern that people have. I don't know if you have tried removing the limits from her. All I can say is, like I said, I've seen many people that do radical unschooling, and they say that usually within a couple weeks of like removing the limits, they kind of lose their appeal and they do other things. I think it's worth experimenting with and seeing. You're used to what it's like when you set limits now, and if you're curious what it would be like for her if you were to remove those limits and give her the freedom to decide how she wants to spend her time, see what she does with it. I think it would be worth experimenting and seeing. Like you're not going to be there to control your daughter all the time, right? And so the more I think that we can help our children to set the limits for themselves, now rather than me always being the one to set the limits for them, I think that that's what will help them to be the best adults that they can be because they're learning now as kids to set their own boundaries rather than depending on a teacher or me as their parent to set the boundaries and try to control them and punish them if they don't abide by the boundaries that I set. Jenny said, I've talked to my son about his passions and interests, and he tells me there really isn't anything he's interested in. He is creating games on Fortnite, though. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, sometimes they might have a hard time like articulating what their passions and interests may be. But again, when they have the freedom to do stuff, see what they do. And you'd be surprised. A lot of really incredible things happen when we give our children the freedom to just be bored. I think we underestimate the gift that it is for our kids to be bored and to have to figure out, gosh, what do I want to do with my time? And to be able to do that. All right, Fernando said, I'm still confused. Would the kids be learning like on a laptop or how do they learn basic schooling at home and how much is the program? Okay. So there are a bunch of different homeschool philosophies. I think a lot of people, when they think about homeschooling, they think about doing school at home. If that's kind of like the idea that you have in mind, you would be basically kind of doing whatever they would be doing in school, and then you would be doing it at home. Whereas with us, we are unschoolers. So that means that we really do live like school does not exist. We're not learning through like a curriculum, or they're not taking online classes. They're not doing homework unless they want to. Um, but they're learning in a way that is natural and organic while they're pursuing their passions and interests. So what does that look like? Let me try to give, so for example, my daughter, we had like a book in my house. And it was a book about the Titanic. And my daughter saw this book one day when she was like a couple of years ago. She saw the book and she was really intrigued by the cover. And she said, Hey, Mom, can you read this book to me? And I said, Sure. And so I grabbed the book and we started like reading through the book together. And she was really fascinated. It was about the Titanic. And she was really, really fascinated with the Titanic. She just wanted to learn about the Titanic, and so it started with this one little book, and then from there she started asking more and more questions. So then that led us to researching about the Titanic on YouTube. So she started watching videos about the Titanic and learning about the history about the boats, and then she started asking questions about like the iceberg and how they saw it and what caused the boat to sink and things like that. And so that inspired her to create her own Titanic. And so she did. She tried to build a Titanic with cardboard, and she tried to figure out how she could sink it. And so that was like a science kind of thing that she was exploring with about floating and buoyancy and how, how the ships kind of work and hold themselves up in water and all of that. And so that was like her next kind of passion from there. And then after that, it wasn't enough for her. She wanted to do more. So we got a 3D puzzle for her about the Titanic. And so she learned how to build this replica of the Titanic. And while she was building the replica, she was able to learn about the different the different rooms that were on the ship and the different jobs that the people had on the ship and the different classes. And so we were able to talk about, the historical time period of the day, how there was first class and second class and third class and kind of who was in those different classes. And that brought on a lot of discussions about classism and things like that. She was still wanting to learn more about it. And so she asked if we could watch the movie. And so we did. We watched the movie. And while we were watching the movie, again, she's learning about the history of it. She's learning about the characters and the dialogue and the plot and the storyline. And we're practicing, like, what do you think is going to happen next and making predictions. And all of those English language art skills were a part of that. We always watch movies with subtitles on. So she was able to practice her reading while we were watching the movie. And but again, that wasn't enough for her. Like, she still wanted to learn more. And so actually just this last week, we were in Tennessee for a homeschool leaders conference. And she, I don't know if you know, in Tennessee, they have the Titanic Museum. And so we were finally able to go to the Titanic Museum, and she was able to go and see, like, basically walk through the Titanic herself and participate in a bunch of different activities there. And she learned how to do the SOS coding, and they were calculating like the math and how many kids were on the boat and how many lifeboats were there. And so she's learning, she's learning about science and math and reading and history and writing and health and all the music and arts and all these different things. She's learning all these different subjects, but it's all around something that she's really passionate about. And could she have learned all of those same subjects in another way? Sure. I could have, like, said, okay, today is Titanic Day because the curriculum says, and so we're going to sit down and we're going to force you to read this paragraph about the Titanic, and now you're going to answer these multiple choice questions about the Titanic, and that's it. That's the curriculum gives us one day on the Titanic, and then tomorrow we're going to move on to the First World War, right? But that's not how we learn as unschoolers. As unschoolers, we have the freedom to learn as much or as little as we want about any topic, and we get to learn as in depth or as little as we want. And you can learn about any topic that you want, because any topic that interests you is what's going to matter most to you. We all remember the things that matter most to us. And if we're trying to force someone to learn something that's not meaningful for them, again, it's not going to go very well. So how do they learn? They learn in a very natural and organic way. Through everything that you're doing. It might be watching a YouTube video that really captures their mind, or maybe you're going outside for a walk and you're listening to, like, the birds that you can hear outside, or you're paying attention to the kinds of bugs that you see while you're walking, or you're learning about hurricanes. We just talked about hurricanes, that there's a hurricane that's coming towards Florida and Georgia, and that inspires you. Oh gosh, we want to learn about this. Well, what causes a hurricane and how does that work? But it's happening naturally and organically because our kids are interested in those topics, not because a curriculum is forcing you to do it because today is Titanic Day. Does that make sense? I hope that gives you a little bit more clarity. All right, and I'll go back. I'm sorry, I'm catching up on the comments here. So Ingrid said, today I enrolled my daughter in PAX Academy. Oh, congratulations. What is the next step, and when will she be able to start to get fourth grade study at home? Okay, so this is kind of what we were talking about. Again, PAX Academy is a private school for unschoolers. We really want your children to embrace a life learning philosophy. We want our children to become lifelong learners that love learning and enjoy learning, and kids that have figured out what they like to learn about, how they like to learn, how they like to spend their time, what are their personal goals and things like that, and for them to pursue those things because they want to, not because someone else is forcing them to do so. And so your first step, Ingrid, would be to go through a process called deschooling. Whenever you start the homeschooling or unschooling process, the first phase of it, which is called deschooling, is the most important phase. Anyone who I know who has had a terrible time homeschooling, it has been because they didn't do this part. They skipped over the deschooling part. And so during the deschooling process, you want to live like school does not exist. And I want you to just kind of like pretend in your brain for a second, like imagine that there's no such thing as school. Just imagine like school does not exist. There's no grades, there's no grade levels, there's no subjects, there's no standards, there's no curriculum, there's no homework, there's no tests, there's no quiz, all the schoolish stuff. Just imagine that all of that is gone. What would be left? What would be left? And what would be left would be you and your child and the relationship that you guys are building together and the life that you are creating together, your real life, the real world. And that's what our children are going to be doing. They're learning what they need as they go through their real life and pursue the things that they are really interested in. All right, Caitlin said, as someone who attended private school their entire schooling lifetime, how long do you think it'll take to deschool? It's really been a struggle for me thus far. Oh, I can so relate to that. So they say, and I'm guilty of this too. I used to say this all the time. If you watch my old videos, you'll see that I said you need to deschool 1 month for every year that you've been in school. In my case, I have a master's degree and I was a teacher for 12 years. So I would always joke, I'm going to be deschooling for the rest of my life. And I would say that as a joke, but honestly, it really is true. The more that I deschool myself, the more I realize I don't think that deschooling will ever be done. I don't know that I will ever finish deschooling. I think I really will spend the rest of my life letting go of the fears and healing from the wounds that I have in my life because of school, because of being in this environment where for so long, we're just controlled and we're meant to, they try to fit us in this like little box, right? Where like learning has to look like this and it has to happen in this way and in this order and in this time. And if they don't do this, then they're going to be a failure. And like all of those things of really questioning, like, what does it mean to be successful? Why am I worried about XYZ? Why am I afraid about XYZ? Why why does it bother me that my kid plays Legos as opposed to playing the piano, right? So like asking yourselves all those really hard questions and really digging deep and letting go of these ideas that aren't serving us or our relationship with our kids. It's hard. It's really, really hard. It's the hardest thing I think I've ever done. But I will say it's also been one of the greatest things that I've ever done to let go of like so many wounds from the past. And like I know for myself, I think one of the hardest things for me was, growing up in school and being, especially as someone I said, you said you attended a private school. I think in a private school in particular, private schools put so much emphasis on performance and finding your value and your worth in what you do. And I also attended a private school, and I think I like carry residuals of that, right? Like this idea that like I can't just be because I always have to be more and I always have to do more and I always have to like be better, and like just that constant idea of having to perform and outperform everyone else around me. All of those ideas are like so ingrained in me from school. And so, yeah, the deschooling process, it really is like a long, long healing journey. And I don't know that we'll ever be done, but I think listening to the Exploring Unschooling podcast would be really helpful. That was really helpful for me. And then also getting the deschooling diary that I mentioned earlier, I think that will also be really helpful for you too. All right, Ingrid said, I hear that some states pay to teach my son at home. Does the Maryland state pay us? No, Maryland state does not pay. We are so there are 17 states that do pay parents to homeschool their kids. Homeschooling families in Maryland are actually very much opposed to this idea. And that is because Maryland has fought very, very, very hard to have the freedom that we do here in Maryland. I don't know if you've seen the HSLDA map of like the United States. All around us is like red and dark blue, all like the worst states to homeschool, and they're all around us. And then Maryland is like this little pocket of easiness, surrounded by all the crazy. And so yeah, I think Maryland is very I don't foresee Maryland ever accepting government funds for that because most of the homeschoolers here really value their freedom more than anything else, and they acknowledge that when you take a benefit from the government, when you take money from the government, then they want to use that as a way to control you. And so I think most Maryland families, most Maryland homeschooling families would rather not take government money and hold on to their freedom than to take some government money and trade that money in for freedom and liberty. So yeah, I don't foresee school choice happening in Maryland anytime soon. Kareem said, "Hi, I have a question. My daughter's in Peaceful World Schoolers. I understand that the umbrella makes a report once a year to what my daughter does. Should I document this, make notes, or how do I let Peaceful World Schoolers know what she's done?" So we don't document what your child has done. The only thing that we have to report is that you are enrolled with us. That's it. We have to report that you are enrolled with us, and then it is our job to make sure that you are complying with COMAR. And the way that we do that legally is that we're required to do an annual review once per year. And with the annual review, again, we meet once a year, and we do that via Zoom. So it will be very similar to this. We'll meet via Zoom, and then you'll talk in a small group of people about how your year has been, all the awesome things that your daughter has learned and done and accomplished. And then you'll be able to share about any questions that you may have or challenges or concerns that you may face along the way. And it is meant to be zero stress for you. You do not have to keep a portfolio unless you want to. You do not have to document, all the books that you've read or all the activities that she's done or classes that she's taking. You don't even have to take classes. Maryland has required subjects, but they don't have required classes and they do not have a required curriculum. So the way that your child learns that subject is entirely up to you. If your daughter wants to learn science by going on nature walks every day and doing a deep dive into, whatever she's learning about as she explores nature on her own independently, awesome. She can do that. If she wants to count her English language arts class by reading all of the Harry Potter series, if that's what she loves and enjoys, awesome. She can count that. So whatever makes them happy, they're able to do that. Rosario said, "I'm new to this. What does PW stand for?" And Kareem answered her, it stands for Peaceful World Schoolers. Yeah. All right, Rosa said, "For PAX Academy, how does the high school transcript look? Does it contain a list of courses, grades, GPA, and etc.?" Yes. Yeah, it does. So their transcript looks just like any other public school or high school transcript. Again, the difference is the way that they earn those credits, right? So some of our students will earn credits, especially at high school. Some of them will want to start taking classes online. So for example, if your unschooler in high school is like, "Hey, I'm planning to go to college, I want to take an algebra class," they can do that. So they might want to take an algebra class and count that as their credit. Some of them prefer to earn credits through testing, so you can test out of certain subjects. Where if you take a class and if you take a test and you pass the test, and you earn the credit for it. And then other students prefer to earn their credits through their life experience. And so in general, most unschoolers earn A's and B's in all subjects because, again, we're not comparing themselves to their public school peers. Rather, they've learned or they've mastered whatever it was that they've mastered over the course of this year, and they didn't master whatever they didn't, and that's okay. So so they'll get an A or a B because they've mastered whatever part of the content it was that they had learned this year. Arlene said, "Hi, I registered yesterday. I have already deschooled. What would you advise to do next?" So yeah, like I mentioned, deschooling is not something that you would ever stop doing. It's something that you're going to do for the rest of your life. I think when you're thinking about, okay, what do we actually do? That would definitely be a conversation that I would have with your kids. So I would probably talk with them and ask them hey, what are some things that I would ask them what are things that you would like to do? What are some things that you would like to learn? What are some goals that you have for yourself? And I try to talk with my kids. So I normally have kind of we normally do a family meeting at the beginning where I just ask them questions, hey, what do you guys want to learn about this year? We talk about what are places that they would like to visit, what are activities that they would like to participate in, what are hobbies that they would like to learn. And actually, I have a guide for this. It's in I wrote an ebook. It's called The Wonderful World of Peaceful World Schooling. And it is a free ebook. You can download it totally free. It's on my website. I'll try to see if I can send you guys out an email with the link for it. It's also on my TikTok link in my bio. So if you want to get that. But within there, it has a bunch of worksheets that you can kind of go through to help guide a conversation with your kids as far as what do you guys actually want to do with your time and what do you want to learn about and things like that. Again, be flexible. Stuff changes over time. But I think it's a good place to start, asking your kids okay, what are your goals? What are you interested in? What would you like to learn about? And then kind of creating a plan together of what you want your week or your structure of your days to look like. Jenny said, I was having my mom watch this with me and try to get her to understand, but she still feels like there should be limits on electronics. I sort of think I should also limit because my son can stay up all night and his sleep schedule is horrible and he is mostly awake at night and we have no time to navigate his interests together. Yeah, the whole topic of screens again, I know it's a really difficult thing to navigate, and I can't tell you what will work or not work for your family. I think that my biggest piece of advice would just be to consider first and foremost, who do you want to be as a human being? What do you want your relationship with your children to be like? And then make decisions or take action that are consistent with that. Um, yeah, that would be probably my best piece of advice for that. Cream said, "Thank you, Angela. I appreciate it." Awesome. All right. You guys asked a lot of really, really deep questions today. I hope that this was helpful. All right, it looks like we have about 5 minutes left. Did anyone else we probably have time for like one more question? And if no one in Zoom has a question, I can take a look at TikTok. Robert, you said escape rooms are the best part of unschooling. You are right. You are absolutely right about that. Escape rooms are like my favorite unschooling tool, hands down. No, but in all seriousness, if you have not done an escape room with your kids, I highly recommend it. They're so fun. You get to learn a lot. Yeah, my kids and I are super fans of escape rooms. Robbie, we have to figure out when we can go do another escape room with your kids. Sophie already asked me. She was like, "Can we go visit my bird lady friend?" I was like, "Yes, we can." She said it was helpful. Good. I'm glad that it was helpful. All right, let me check over here in TikTok and see if we got any questions. Katie said PAX Academy is the best and Angela's awesome. Thank you. Hold on. Reading through here. Someone said hi. Jessica said yes, mine used 2BE on the phone and the TV and now on their own. They want to learn and have a job. It's life-changing. Jessica said when they themselves make the decision on their own, it changes a whole lot when they're willing. Sorry, I can't read this, but here, willing to do by themselves. Yeah, Debbie said, I do not set limit for screens. At first it was bad, but now he limits himself. He's off more than on. Yeah, again, this is something like I hear over and over and over from people that do radical unschooling, that at the very beginning, when they remove those limits, the kids do kind of like binge on screens a little bit, probably because, again, they've been limited for so long. But when they remove those limits over time, they just kind of balance out and it loses its appeal. Like they're not like clinging to it, whereas when we set limits and it's like, okay, you can only have this for an hour, then they exhibit more of those like addictive behaviors because there's that fear that like, oh my gosh, my mom's going to take this away in an hour, I'm not going to have it, this thing that I really enjoy. But yeah, Rosara said as far as college credit classes, like, sorry, I don't know, I can't see this. Okay, hold on. As far as college classes go, like AP, how would homeschool be able to go about that for my daughter who's in 10th grade? Okay. So if you were enrolled in PAX Academy, I would highly recommend that you watch the 3-hour masterclass that I did on how to hack your high school. It's longer than 3 hours. It's like 3 hours and 15 minutes, but it is worth just that masterclass alone is worth the enrollment fee of $350 for the year. During that class, I will literally teach you how you can save tens of thousands of dollars on your college education. But yes, when it comes to classes like AP, so the funny thing is you do not have to take an AP class in order to take the AP test. And that's a really, really important thing to know. But you do have to take AP tests at your local high school. So if your daughter is interested in taking an AP test, she has to register for that before November 15th. So I set a goal for myself to try to notify them by October, which is like right around the corner. So if you can try to notify them sooner rather than later and just tell them, hey, I want my daughter wants to take the AP Spanish test or the AP English language test or the AP algebra test or whatever the tests are that she wants to take, have her do that. Another thing that she can do as well, if she doesn't want to do the AP test, they have to take it at the local high school. But there's another test that's called the CLEP test, CLEP. It stands for College Level Examination Program. So if she takes the CLEP test, she can actually take that from the comfort of her own home, which is really nice. So I'm a big fan of CLEP. And actually within PAX Academy, I have a whole like unit on testing and hacking out of all that stuff. There's actually a way that you can even take those for free, like the AP test and the CLEP test, totally free. So yeah, all of that is within the PAX Academy course. So whenever you enroll, make sure that you watch that and you go through the whole course, and it will explain literally step by step all the stuff you have to know about all those things. Great question. All right. Sorry, we've got some questions over here. Marcia said, no limits at home, and my kid is always asleep by 9 p.m. When she's done, she's done. Yep. Josh, are you still here, Josh? Josh is my brother. If you don't follow him, go follow him. He's a really cool guy. He will make you laugh on TikTok a lot. He's the funny one. All right. ¿Alguien sabe cómo entrar en el Zoom? So you can, if you want to be on the Zoom next month, you can just register on my website. I have a link. If you click here, the link in my bio, there's a link where you can register for the Zoom. Sorry, I'm trying to look through all these questions here. Oh, thank you guys for sending all the roses. That is so sweet. Jessica said it's psychological. Like when you say no, it draws attention, and then they just let loose and they pick when to. Yeah. No, it's so true. It's really an interesting phenomenon. That was definitely something I was really worried about the beginning with my daughter. Like if I were to not set limits with screens, I was like, oh my gosh, she's gonna do nothing but play on play video games all day. And I mean there are days that where she does play for a long time. But no, like she does do other things besides screens. And I think a big part of that is like she's okay because she knows that she can always go back to it at any point in time. Like I'm not, limiting her and like, oh, you can only do this thing for 1 hour. And I try to think, I try to put myself in her perspective, like, how would I feel if someone were to, like any other adult were to just come up and be like, okay, Angela, you've been on your cell phone for an hour today. Now you're done. I'd be like, wait a minute, but I'm like in the middle of something, and I think a lot of times we're not really sensitive to that as well. Like, and I try to be mindful of that too. Like there'll be sometimes that I'll be like, all right, Sophia, I'm gonna go to bed, it's time to go to bed or whatever. And being able again to have those dialogues with her, like give her the space where she can say, hey mom, I'm in the middle of this game. Can I play for like 10 more minutes? And I'm like, sure, I don't know. It just, yeah, I definitely have seen that though. Like the more that we try to set these external limits and the more that we try to impose limits on our kids, I think it definitely can have a negative impact, not just on like their own experience of that thing, but also on our relationship. Yes. Oh my gosh. Hey, Sophia, can I ask you a question? There are some, I know this is kind of a random thing. So we had a
Very random.
yes, can you come sit for a second? I just want to ask you while all these other people are here.
Hello.
So we've been some parents had some questions about screens, and I was telling them about how like we don't really have limits on screens. Like you can kind of be on screens when you want.
It's after 10 or no, after 10. Yes, after 10.
Yeah.
As long as it's past 10 a.m., I'm able to be on, unless it's for good reasons or if you guys say yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And
And
then,
do you think that it's hard for you to like put the screen down, or like that you just do screens all day every day? Oh, thank you. So TikTok does this. It makes you do these like puzzles to make sure that you're still alive and awake.
well, what happens if you don't touch them?
Then it will like turn off the live and it will go away. What do you think about that? Like, do you think that parents should set limits for screens, or do you think that
I think it's nice to have that thing you put on where or you have like if it's past 10 o'clock or it is 10 o'clock, you can be on the iPad or put in the code thingy.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like that. It helps me not always be on the iPad
Mm-hmm.
and all. What was the question again?
Yeah, I mean, do I have to like tell you to get off the iPad every day, or like are there some days where you just like get tired of it by yourself and you do other things?
Sometimes when we have to go somewhere, you'll tell me to turn it off.
Mm-hmm.
Um, sometimes, well, most of the time I do get bored and I turn it off myself.
Mm-hmm.
I taught Nana how to send into adventures in Odyssey, and you can hear it from the listen.
Oh, I can hear it.
She said that she always wanted to listen to it, but she didn't know how to turn it on, so I helped search it up for her. Now she's
So you
listening.
taught Nana how to use the Odyssey on her iPad? Was that on her iPad?
She
On her
doesn't
phone,
know.
okay. I think she did have an iPad a while ago. I don't know. Okay. So you feel like it's okay, like you don't mind doing stuff not on the screen?
No, I don't mind. I really enjoy coloring, reading with you,
Mm-hmm.
especially the mama book. And I enjoy cuddling, and I enjoy playing outside or playing with my friends.
How would you feel if I told you that you could only be on your iPad for an hour a day or 2 hours a day?
It could be fine,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like at some point I may get a little bit annoyed for just that period of time.
Yeah. So that might be a little annoying or frustrating for you.
Maybe.
Yeah. Did you like when we did Tech Free Tuesdays? Do you remember that? Or we'd like have no screens on Tuesdays, or when we do like our candle nights?
That one never really worked out. Everyone's kind of just still on.
We did pretty good for Tech Free Tuesdays for a while. That was when you were younger though. I don't know if you remember.
I do remember Text Free Tuesday.
Okay. And then candle night, do you like candle nights?
Yes, candle nights I love, and especially when we play the board games.
Mm-hmm. So for those of you who don't know, can you tell them what candle night is?
Candle night is where we're eating dinner, and we put up these candles and we light them up. And my aunt Patty, she'll make her carnita. I'm used to saying carnita. Carnita is steak, and roast, which is meat, and that the word carnita is meat.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. And she'll make like lettuce, or she'll add like fruit or apples or cut up apples, or she'll add like a little bowl of cheese cubes, and we'll have like her. You will take like a piece of steak. Me and Ben eat like little chopped up ones.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll play either a board game, or we'll kind of just sit and eat, or we'll talk together and ask questions. And that's a candle night dinner because we have candles and we're eating dinner.
Yep.
No screens allowed unless it's videos.
Yes. Yep. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing. Does anyone else have any other questions for Sophia while I have her here, or did you want to go back to your game with Nana?
We just finished.
Okay. Awesome.
I devoured my grandma.
She was playing Crazy Eights with my mom, and she won really a lot.
On the first round, Nana beat me, but then on the second one, I
Looks
got
like you beat her on all the other ones. Oh wow!
I got a 0, and then on the first round I won. Then on the second, Nana won. Then on the third I won. Then on the fourth I won. Then on the fifth I won.
Oh my gosh, you had 3 the whole way down. That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, Addie said I have a question for the game in your program. I don't know yet. We'll see. She says I have for the game in your program is for the kids. Which game? Sorry, I don't know what you're talking about.
The type. Well, I'm gonna go. No one has any questions for me. I love you.
All right, love you too. I'll be down in a second. All right.
Bye.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording then.